Foreign Language Skills. Module 1. 1.1.
So, Hannah, I'm currently teaching English as a second language, and I love for my students to get confident in producing English or increasing their ability, their listening ability.
Yes.
So I know that you speak English as a second language, but you do such an amazing job, and it's inspiring to me. So I love my students to improve and so because you're a perfect example, what are some strategies you have for my students I could tell them?
Right. Firstly, I worked on listening, and there's so many websites that are designed for English learners.
Right.
Like Elo here, you are listening to.
Yeah.
And YouTube or any, so many sites that you can check on, and like that. I'll probably start with the listening first.
Okay. So you said firstly listening. So why is listening so important?
It's because when you want to communicate, of course, the English as a tool, communication tool, you have to understand what the speakers say. So first I worked on listening, and then by listening at the audio or the sound, then you can learn vocab and also spelling, and the meaning, of course. And eventually you can move on to next English skill. So that's why I start working on listening first.
So what about anything else that you have? Any other strategies?
Personally, I found it learning vocab, and especially idioms, helped me a lot.
Yeah, idioms are tough.
Yes, because often I found it difficult to understand what the speakers say. I could hear or I could understand what the single words they say, but sometimes it was hard to sort of grasp the meaning, what they're actually saying. So learning idioms or vocab helped me a lot. Yeah.
So when you learn the idioms and you can understand them, did you ever use them yourself? When you tried it out in the wild, so to speak, using the idioms you learned to
yes, I did it gradually. I mean, when I was in high school, I started studying English when I was high school. First thing I did was to visiting those websites that are designed for English speakers, English learners, and at the same time I start watching American TV dramas, and in that sense, you can sort of understand in what situation you can use those particular phrases or idioms, and by learning the idioms and vocab and the settings or the environment, the situation you can use, then you can sort of actually try to use them. At the same, the beginning I was so nervous.
Right. I'm sure, yeah. I mean, it's really difficult to use idioms in any language, but English has so many, I think. So another thing I wanted to ask you about production skills in English is writing. So I try to give my students opportunities to write in class, but in order to be a proficient and excellent English speaker, you need to practice outside of class. So what do you recommend to improve students' writing abilities besides just taking it for a test or for an assignment? What do you recommend?
Yes, this is very difficult. I myself have trouble still writing because I am not a good writer in my native language.
Oh no.
So, but I guess just reading will help you at the start. Reading text.
Okay, so if you know how to read, you can help you write.
Yes, definitely. To learn sort of the templates, how the things goes, and how you make paragraph and stuff. So probably if you want to get better at writing, I would start reading first. Reading lots of passages, different kinds of materials first.
So so that's true, and I agree with that. And so one thing I wanted to have my students do is actually do a journal, actually.
Yes,
so did you ever keep an English journal to help with your writing?
Yes, I did.
Oh, you did?
I did, yeah.
How do you feel that helped you? Was that good? A good
yes,
idea?
Because first when you write, unlike speaking or talking to somebody, it gives you time to really think about what you want to do, what you want to write, and you can focus on grammar more, and that helps you to actually talk to somebody maybe next day, or you have to write something else in the class that would help you. So keeping the journal will help you definitely, I think.
Okay, thank you very much for the tips. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Module 1. 1.2.
Most people know that the English language is spoken by millions of people around the world. However, few people are aware of the history of the English language. Today, English is one language, but in some ways, it's a mixture of many different languages. The English language is most closely related to a group of languages called the Germanic languages. This group also includes languages such as German and Dutch. About 1,500 years ago, these languages were not yet distinct from each other. Some of the people of Germany and the Netherlands then moved to England. Those people were called the Anglo-Saxons, and their language then evolved into English. Most of the basic words of the English language are derived from these very old Anglo-Saxon languages. For example, words for the parts of the body, for numbers, and for animals are mostly Anglo-Saxon words. Some new words were brought to England over 1,000 years ago by people who came from the Scandinavian countries of Northern Europe. Many words that begin with the letters SK, such as skin and skill, are Scandinavian words. A major change happened in the English language after the year 1066. In that year, England was conquered by a king from the northern part of France. He and his followers spoke French, so French became an important language in England. During the next few hundred years, the English language absorbed a very large number of French words. In fact, today's English dictionaries contain more words of French origin than of Anglo-Saxon origin. Part of the reason why the English language has so many words is that it often has two words for each idea, one word of Anglo-Saxon origin and one word of French origin. Many more words entered the English language a few hundred years ago when science and technology became more widespread. Most scientific and technical words are derived from words of the ancient languages of Latin and Greek. Because there are so many of these scientific and technical words in the English language today, the influence of Latin and Greek has been quite large. Other languages have also contributed many words to the English language. Some words have come from the Celtic languages, spoken in Ireland, Scotland, and Wales. Many words have been added to the English language by immigrants who came to North America from various countries of Europe. Also, many more words have been adopted from the native languages of North America, Australia, and the Pacific, and from the languages of the peoples of Africa and Asia. All of these words have made English a very interesting language.
Module 1. 1.3.
I've lived in many different countries, both in Western Europe, the Middle East, and now here in Hong Kong. And during all of that time, I've learned 5 or 6 different languages, to one degree or another. I love learning languages. Not only are they important when you move to a country, I just find them fascinating. Before I came to Hong Kong, I lived in Barcelona, Spain for 10 years. And when I first arrived, the most important thing was being able to communicate with people locally. I don't attend classes. I don't think I'm particularly good in classes. I prefer to learn by just talking to people, finding out what I need to say by looking at dictionaries and listening carefully. Other things that helped me when I first moved to Spain were watching the typical kinds of programs we see every day on channels around the world. For example, the weather. This is great because they always say the same things, so you can really quickly hear the same words repeated again and again, and the pictures help, of course. Other types of program that helped me learn Spanish quickly were things like game shows, where the same thing happens. They have a catchphrase or a slogan that they repeat endlessly when contestants win or when they're called to compete. As well as that, I used to pick up the Spanish newspapers. First of all, I just accepted there was no way I was going to understand anything but 1 or 2 words. But gradually, I found that I learned lots of new things about this. I was interested because I wanted to know what was happening in the country I lived in. But I also knew that I could learn a lot of language this way, so I'd take a dictionary with me sometimes, or I'd notice a word and I'd ask other people what it meant. Anyway, by far the best practice I ever had was just talking to people in the street or in shops where I'd rehearse in my head what I wanted to say beforehand before I went in. Usually, I made a right mess of it first of all, but after you get over the embarrassment, it's quite funny really, and people are very sympathetic and supporting in most cases. It took me a long time to develop a good level of Spanish. I lived there for 10 years, and I think I'm very fluent now. But I think for the first 2 years that I was there, it was quite a struggle to hold a decent conversation. There were always lots of words and expressions that I didn't pick up on. In particular were the colloquial expressions, idioms, that kind of thing, that people use in everyday talk, but you don't necessarily see written down. I didn't find those very easy to learn at all. But it was a lot of fun, and people, as I said, are really supporting when they know that you're genuinely interested in learning their language.
Module 1. 1.4.
British Council provides resources for people learning English and also teachers of English. Martin Peacock is the Director of Global English Product Development. Martin, tell me about English as a global language.
Okay, well, many people talk about English as being a global language. And the reasons for that are the widespread use of English. It's used in education, it's used in science and technology, and importantly, English is also used in business.
Are there many global languages?
Well, no, not really. I mean, there's the global language, which is English. In the sense that English is used in these many different contexts, there's only one. There are other languages which are used very widely and spoken by many people in many different places. Cantonese, for example, the variant of Chinese is spoken in many different places. So it's global in a geographic sense, and it can be global in the numbers, but in terms of the use in different areas of education, science, research, English is the only global language.
Are there different types of English?
Well, yes, there are lots of different types. There's different accents of English. I come from the north of England where I have a particular accent. So within England itself, within the UK, there are many variations in English pronunciation. And that extends globally. So you see English in America, used in Australia, which is different in accent and also in usage as well.
And what about the impact of technology on a language?
In the past, new words were coined by people. It might have been in a speech or in a newspaper article or in a book. They were written down, and then other people adapted them and used them, and that could be quite a slow process. And new words might come into language over a long period, 10, 20 years. So technology allows languages to evolve much more quickly.
So technology can change the language, but in what way does it help people to learn the language?
Well, it helps in many ways. In the past, students in locations in other countries didn't have access to much genuine English. They may have a book or an odd newspaper. But what the internet allows them is to read, and often read and translate languages like English on a massive scale.
People learn English for different reasons, and knowledge of the language is often important in fields like medicine, business and computing. English is becoming more and more important in order to communicate in the international world. English opens doors to employment, education and mobility, and it helps teachers and learners engage across the globe.
Module 1. 1.5.
I think technology in general has been worked into everyone's day-to-day life.
It is the first thing I do when I wake up and when I go to bed.
It's easy to just pick up your phone, turn it on.
Call a ride and just go wherever you want.
New places to eat, new places to explore.
It's great to stay in touch.
I met my girlfriend on online dating apps, so I'd say that's a positive right there.
Do you feel like you're in control of technology, or is technology in control of you?
Oof.
Oh, it's definitely more control.
My biggest issue with it is knowing when to stop.
5 and 10 minutes here and there, I feel like takes up a bunch of my day.
I feel like it's in control of me, like if my phone's dead for like half the day or something and I'm going crazy.
I think my math grade is the way it is because of my phone.
Now I notice my eyes are like a little, like I blink a little bit more, they get tired.
He should just throw his phone away.
Usually I feel in control of technology. Usually
I can catch myself and be like, you need to chill out.
I think you have to set a limit and say that you control the phone, it doesn't control you.
I'd say most people hate on technology, but if you're using it for good things, I think it's really helpful.
Well, we think it's important that they do have access to it and learn it.
Technology is not so much as a necessary evil, it's a necessary good that could go either way. You know, the jury's out. It's up to us as to what we do with the technology.
The people that come here, they speak sometimes Finnish, sometimes Swedish, sometimes we switch between sentences. Ja, liten kaffe. Sometimes you forget, oh, did they speak Swedish, did they speak Finnish? Kiitos. Kiitos. Just speak whatever.
It's so natural for us to live in a language environment like this. Well, in areas where you have both Finnish and Swedish speakers, law requires you to have signs in both languages, majority languages on top and the minority language on the bottom. We don't consider it a problem, we consider it more a richness of our culture. So now the majority language Finnish, if more Swedish people move in, the majority language would change, then we would need to change all your road signs. We would do it happily. Swedish is my mother tongue. Then I speak almost a perfect Finnish. When we speak Swedish together with friends, we always spice it with Finnish words. Finnish is a very rich language and has at least 30 words describing snow, while Sweden has only a few.
Here are people who only speak Swedish and people who only speak Finnish, but still we are like managing to have conversations. They say everything Swedish and Finnish and let you as a customer to choose which language you prefer. I grew up in central Finland. My mother tongue is Finnish. I really like this Swedish language. It's kind of round and soft. Like Ekenes is a perfect match for me because here I'm surrounded by the language. Once moving here, we had this inner question that are we allowed to be here as Finnish speakers? But we have lived here for 2 years now. People were super welcoming and open for us and they were eager to get to know us. When we go back to our parents' place where you don't hear any Swedish, I kind of miss that.
Everybody in the whole world should speak more languages. Without the language, you cannot really get into the culture. I hope that kids learn more, maybe 3, maybe 5. Why not 6?
Module 1. 1.7.
Google added 24 languages to its translation service, bringing the total number to 133. Google Translate is an indispensable tool. It conveniently and quickly translates vocabulary and texts into other languages. The 24 new languages are spoken by more than 300 million people. Among them are indigenous languages of the Americas. Google started its first translation service in 2006. It has continually added to the number of languages. Google said it still has a way to go. There are 7,000 languages worldwide that Translate doesn't translate. Translate needs a large amount of linguistic data to support a language. Google explained how new technology helped to add the new languages. It said, "Up until a couple of years ago, it simply was not technologically possible to add languages like these, which are what we call a low resource, meaning that there are not very many text resources for them. Google hopes to support languages used by large populations. It also wants to provide assistance for indigenous languages that are often overlooked by technology.
Module 1. 1.8.
Where would we be without language? We'd all be in our own worlds, and we'd never really have a life. Can you imagine never talking to anyone? Of course, if there was no language, we wouldn't be able to use body language or sign language. The fact that we do have languages means we have gone to the moon and built things like the internet, which also needs a special computer language to work properly. I think language is amazing. It means we can tell anyone anything. I often think it's a shame there are so many languages in the world. If there was only one language, we could all communicate better. Perhaps that way we'd all understand one another better. What would the world language be? At the moment, English.
Module 1. 1.9.
If there's a secret or hack to learning a new language, it's this. Hours and hours of awkward and strenuous conversation with people better than you in that language. An hour of conversation with corrections and a dictionary for reference is as good as 5 hours in a classroom and 10 hours with a language course by yourself. There are a few reasons for this. The first is motivation. I don't care how cool your study guide is, you're going to be far more invested and motivated to communicate with a live person in front of you than a book or audio program on your computer. The second reason is that language is something that needs to be processed, not memorized. I'm no expert on language learning, but in my experience, staring and memorizing a word in a book or with flashcards 100 times does not stick the same way that being forced to use a word in conversation a mere 2 or 3 times does. I believe the reason is that our minds place more priority on memories which involve actual human and social experiences, memories which have emotions tied to them. So, for instance, if I look up the verb for to complain and use it in a sentence with a new friend, chances are I'm always going to associate that word with that specific interaction and conversation I was having with her. Whereas I can blow by that same word 20 times with flashcards, and even though I may get it right, I haven't actually practiced implementing it. It means nothing to me, so it is less likely to stick with me.
Module 1. 1.10.
22 Tips for Learning a Foreign Language. May 24, 2012, by Mark Manson. When I arrived in Buenos Aires in the beginning of 2010, I could barely order food in a local restaurant. 2 years later, I calmly explained the mechanics of Russian grammar to a Guatemalan friend in her native Spanish. Today, I'm conversationally fluent in both Spanish and Brazilian Portuguese, and low conversational in Russian. I'm not going to blow smoke up your ass and tell you it was easy or that there's some shortcut or hack. I practiced my ass off. Honestly, I've seen these supposed hacks for language learning, and none of them worked for me. It took hours of study combined with stumbling through many conversations. Here are some language learning tips I've gathered over the past few years. 1. Conversation, conversation, conversation. If there's a secret or hack to learning a new language, it's this. Hours and hours of awkward and strenuous conversation with people better than you in that language. An hour of conversation with corrections and a dictionary for reference is as good as 5 hours in a classroom and 10 hours with a language course by yourself. There are a few reasons for this. The first is motivation. I don't care how cool your study guide is, you're going to be far more invested and motivated to communicate with a live person in front of you than a book or audio program on your computer. The second reason is that language is something that needs to be processed, not memorized. I'm no expert on language learning, but in my experience, staring and memorizing a word in a book or with flashcards 100 times does not stick the same way that being forced to use a word in conversation a mere 2 or 3 times does. I believe the reason is that our minds place more priority on memories which involve actual human and social experiences, memories which have emotions tied to them. So, for instance, if I look up the verb for to complain and use it in a sentence with a new friend, chances are I'm always going to associate that word with that specific interaction and conversation I was having with her. Whereas I can blow by that same word 20 times with flashcards, and even though I may get it right, I haven't actually practiced implementing it. It means nothing to me, so it is less likely to stick with me. 2. Intensity of study trumps length of study. What I mean by this is that studying a language 4 hours a day for 2 weeks will be more beneficial for you than studying 1 hour a day for 2 months. This is one reason why so many people take language classes in school and never remember anything. It's because they only study 3 to 4 hours per week, and often the classes are separated by multiple days. Language requires a lot of repetition, a lot of reference experiences, and a consistent commitment and investment. It's better to allot a particular period of your life, even if it's only 1 to 2 weeks, and really go at it 100%, than to half-ass it over the course of months or even years. 3. Classes suck and are an inefficient use of time and money. All things considered, you get a really poor return for your time and effort in group classes. There are 2 problems. The first is that the class moves at the pace of its slowest student. The second is that language learning is a fairly personal process. Everyone naturally learns some words or topics easier than others. Therefore, a class is not going to be able to address each student's personal needs as well or in a timely fashion. For instance, when I took Russian classes, I found verb conjugations to be simple because I had already learned Spanish, but an English classmate struggled quite a bit with them. As a result, I spent a lot of my class time waiting around for him to catch up. I also had a German classmate who had already been exposed to cases, whereas I had no clue what they were. I'm sure he ended up waiting around for me to figure it out as well. The larger the classroom, the less efficient it's going to be. Anyone who had to take a foreign language in school and retained absolutely none of it can tell you this.